bit of a taste of what it might be like in terms of the questions you might explore in our Tuesday Alpha Taster Talks. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with volunteer Alpha Group leader Scott Pilkington, who's going to share some of his experience as well. Good morning, Scott. Great to have you back with us on the show.
Kia ora.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Kat.
Now, Scott, first of all, let's just talk about what drew you to attend Alpha in the first instance.
Yes, thanks, guys. Yeah, I first did it in my 20s, and I'm now 44, so that's going back a wee way. So it's a bit hard for me to remember that one. But the one that I do remember very clearly is redoing it when I was age 37. When I was 32, my father had passed away from cancer, and to be honest, my faith had gone through a real desert place. Following that, my wife and I still went to church each week, and the church that we went to, preached very faithfully from the Bible. But if I'm honest, my faith, I guess, which I can talk to, was probably on life support. Occasionally we'd turn up and it would feel like the sermon was meant just for us. But I wasn't reading my Bible or praying regularly. And then Alpha got advertised, and it was actually my wife who signed us up, wanting to give our faith a bit of impetus. And basically what happened was that actually the Alpha course, if my faith was on life support, the Alpha course was like the defibrillator zapping paddles, and it zapped us, and it zapped me, and it zapped my faith out. And I know that the defibrillator, the purpose of it is to reset your heart when your heart's become erratic, and my heart for God had become erratic, and this Alpha course zapped it back into life, and I am so thankful for it.
What do you think is so unique and special about the environments in an Alpha course?
It's a very, very special place to be. Alpha, I've obviously been trained by Alpha New Zealand as our entire team, but they have a series of wonderful principles. Anyone's welcome, any question is welcomed, and they also emphasize that food and laughter are actually really important as well. And so what that means is that when people come along, no question's a silly question, and people can just ask anything. They can ask really difficult questions like, why does God allow suffering, for instance? And so as a group, we'll kind of like tackle that, and it's just quite a beautiful place to sort of be together.
Having hosted an Alpha myself a few years ago, I remember just the importance that they reiterated around, like you say, sharing food together, because that is done a lot in the Bible. Jesus ate with many different people, and there's this special environment you create when you invite people in with hospitality, and it sort of creates a safe and comfortable place, doesn't it?
Yes. Well, it's about clearly the content, I guess, is the most important thing, but the second most important thing is that people come along and they experience relationship, and they realize that not only does God love them, but actually there's people who love them, and people who care for them, and people who are willing to chat about stuff, and if need be, cry with them about the sad things that have happened in their life. And so Alpha generally creates a place for that to happen.
Well, look, as you say, it's about relating in an environment to engage with the content. And one of the things that stands out about Alpha is wrestling with, a lot of the big questions in regards to faith. And one of those that Alpha includes, well, it's a big one. Was Jesus even a real person? Now, we as Christians can go, well, yes, but for some, often in their minds, there's an idea floating around, is it a myth? Is there something else in this? Was he actually a person? So how do you actually engage with this notion and this question?
One of the main host of Alpha since I think circa 1990 has been Nicky Gumbel, and Nicky Gumbel was actually an ex-UK barrister. So of course a barrister, lawyer, used to being in court, used to presenting evidence, engaging in historical evidence to reach conclusions about court cases. And here he is in charge of the Alpha course globally, and he's the one who's constructing the evidence that gets presented for the Alpha course. And so they go through it very, very factually and deliberately, like you would expect a lawyer would. So they look at different things like, what did contemporary historians say about Jesus? So people like Roman historians like Tacitus and Suetonius, they both gave accounts of Jesus's life. The Jewish historian Josephus, he spoke wrote about in the first century about Jesus being a wonderful doer of works, spoke about his crucifixion and alleged resurrection. And basically, they look at that aspect, what did the contemporary historians say, but then they also look at what's called textual criticism. So how many manuscripts are there giving an account for Jesus's life, how many different lenses, and what was the time gap between Jesus living and these being written? And what you find is that they're written very, very quickly after Jesus's life. This man, if he was just a man, was very extraordinary, because within 40 to 100 years, people were writing all kinds of accounts, eyewitness accounts of his life. And we have so many ancient fragments on papyrus. And basically the Alpha Course goes through, and the fact that these things are remarkably consistent. And as a result, any serious historian doesn't deny the existence of Jesus. In fact, with the conclusion at the end of this is that we can have very good confidence about the authenticity and the accuracy of the Bible.
And in terms of how Jesus compares to other historical figures that are noted in history, I mean, how does his presence compare to someone of the likes of Julius Caesar, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Kat, and something that gets looked at by Nicky Gumbel in the course. And the kind of things that they will say is accounts of Jesus's life started to appear within 40 to 100 years, like I've mentioned, and the earliest fragments that we have from recollection from the Alpha Course are about 130 AD, so pretty close to his life. And then there's an enormous number of manuscripts, like I think, again, from memory, 5,300 Greek manuscripts. So we have this enormous body of manuscripts written very closely after his life, whereas Julius Caesar, obviously there's other evidence for him, statues, coins, we know that he exists too, but an example would be his account of the Gallic Wars. I believe from memory that the first manuscripts that we have of that are from 950 AD, a long time after he lived.
So knowing that, I mean, that's incredible, really, knowing that the veracity of these texts that point to the fact that Jesus was a real person, because there are unbelievers that believe that, Christians are walking around believing in a fairy tale character, which is absolutely not true, because history has proven otherwise. So knowing that kind of information for you personally, Scott, I mean, what kind of impact does knowing that kind of information and having these kind of discussions, what kind of impact has that had on you personally?
Well, it means that I take the Bible very, very seriously. And the things that Jesus said are, if you think about it, quite outrageous, aren't they? I've heard people talk about it as like the upside down kingdom. The world says someone does you wrong. The Bible says, well, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. But more than that, he says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And he talks about radical generosity and giving away everything to the poor. So these are radical principles. But then if you know that actually what he said is real, then, well, I base my entire life on it. So even though it seems crazy advice, you kind of think, well, this is what he said. And then what you find is that when you live it, that your life just gets unlocked, and it's just so exciting. And these principles really are true, and they can really be counted on.
Well, I mean, well, it is a big question, and it's one of many as people wrestle with their faith. And Alpha, an opportunity to wrestle with these questions, but also to wrestle with them in a relational way, and an opportunity to really engage in discussion around these things. So, Scott, just as we come to a close, where can people go if they'd like to find out more about Alpha courses?
There's an amazing website that Alpha New Zealand puts up called alpha.org.nz, and I would encourage people to go along. They've got a course finder. You can find a course near you. So if you want to be a participant, I would look one up. But if you want to lead, then I would contact Alpha New Zealand. They've got trainers who can train and equip the people in your church or in your community to run these, and they've got a wealth of amazing resources.